All right, let's dive into this one. Your Money or Your Life by Vicky Robin and Joe Dominguez. You shared some pieces from the prologue and a few chapters of this thing, and wow, it's a New York Times bestseller, so it's got to have something going for it.
Right. It's definitely a classic and for good reason.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
it really makes you think differently about work and spending and what it really takes to feel fulfilled.
Okay, so let's break down this whole money trap idea. It's kind of like we're all stuck running on this treadmill, working jobs we might not even like, to buy stuff we don't really need, just to keep up this lifestyle that might not even be making us happy. And it's not just a few people who feel this way. Robin and Dominguez share these stories of people from all walks of life who are caught in this trap.
Like the story of Penny, the successful salesman. The type big house, fancy cars, the whole 9 yards. But he still felt like something was missing. Or Diane, the computer programmer, feeling trapped by her job even though it paid well. What's interesting is that it shows us how the money trap can get anyone, no matter how much they make or what they do.
Yeah, it really makes you wonder, is this just the price we pay for living in the modern world? The book even points out that even though incomes are going up, personal debt is rising too. It's like we're working more, but not really feeling any better off. Have you ever felt that pressure? To keep up with everyone else, to buy the newest gadgets or take that fancy vacation, just because it seems like everyone else is.
Oh yeah, it's definitely common experience.
Yeah.
And Robin and Dominguez say it comes from what they call the old roadmap for money. This idea that we need more and more to be happy. But then the book asks this really important question. What happens when more just isn't an option anymore?
So we're all stuck on this treadmill working and spending. But what happens when that treadmill hits a wall? That's where the book takes kind of a serious turn when it starts talking about the limits to growth.
Yeah, it argues that our whole system of constantly needing the economy to grow just isn't sustainable in the long run when we consider things like how many resources we actually have
Yeah.
and how much the planet can handle. Use the example of Easter Island. Remember that one? Where they used up all their resources and the whole society collapsed. It's a pretty scary story about what can happen when we consume more than the environment can replenish.
It's a stark reminder that the planet isn't some endless buffet. We can't just keep piling our plates high. Right.
Exactly. And even though technology has let us push those limits further and further, Robin and Dominguez argue that it's like we're using up the planet on credit, like maxing out your credit card knowing you'll have to pay it all back eventually. We're building up this ecological debt that future generations are going to have to deal with.
Whoa. It makes you wonder, how did we even get to this point? Where we feel like we constantly have to be buying new stuff, your money or your life actually digs into the history of consumerism. That's pretty surprising. It turns out it wasn't because people really needed more stuff. It was more about needing to keep the economy growing.
Yeah, and it's kind of ironic because at first people were actually afraid of having too much free time. Can you believe that? People like Henry Ford were worried that if people had too much time on their hands,
Yeah.
they wouldn't be productive enough and the economy would suffer.
Really? Why
Which,
were they so afraid of free time back then?
well, instead of being afraid of leisure time, the system started to see it as like an opportunity to create new needs and new desires and to keep people buying stuff. Enter consumerism, advertising, easy credit. All these things popped up to encourage us to constantly want more, to keep spending and keep the economy going.
So it's interesting to see how fear of having free time actually led to all this consumerism that we're bombarded with today. It really makes you think about the impact it's all having on us and the planet.
The book definitely doesn't shy away from that. Robin and Dominguez argue that all this consumerism is having a really bad impact on the environment.
One stat from the book really got me thinking. It said that the richest 20% of the world uses resources at a rate that would need 4 more planets if everyone lived like that. It made me take a hard look at my own lifestyle and how much I consume.
It's definitely a wake-up call for all of us, especially for those of us who care about the planet. It makes you question what it really means to be prosperous. If our current model of economic growth and all this consumption is hurting the planet, and maybe not even making us that happy, then what's the alternative?
Yeah, exactly. There has to be a different way. And that's where your money or your life introduces this really cool concept called the fulfillment curve.
It's a way of looking at how much money you spend and how satisfied you are with life.
Yeah.
You know how they're connected? The book suggests that while spending money on basic needs like food and shelter does make us happier, once those needs are met, spending more doesn't necessarily mean we'll keep getting happier.
So those basic needs lead to fulfillment. But after that, it's not a straight line to happiness.
Right, exactly. Robin and Dominguez argue that after a certain point, spending more actually leads to what they call clutter. This clutter can be actual stuff, too many possessions, but it can also be mental and emotional. Too many things going on, too many things demanding our attention.
So instead of bringing us more happiness, all that extra spending just weighs us down. What's interesting is that the authors actually went through this process of simplifying their lives, downsizing, and getting rid of stuff. And they say it actually made them feel more fulfilled.
They really believe that by consuming less and living more intentionally, we can actually lessen our impact on the planet. At the same time, feel happier. And they don't just stop there. They actually have a 9-step program in the book that's supposed to help people achieve what they call financial independence and ultimately live a more fulfilling life.
Now, when they say financial independence, what do they actually mean?
They're talking about having enough saved up and invested that you can cover your living expenses without having to work for a paycheck. It's about having the freedom to choose how you spend your time and energy without being tied to a job you might not even like.
Wow, that sounds amazing. But if we're all so stuck in this cycle of working and spending, how do we even start to break free?
Yeah, it feels like such a big change, though. Where do you even start with all of this? How do you get out of this money trap?
Well, Robin and Dominguez say that being aware of the problem is the first step. Like, you can't change something if you don't even know it's happening.
Right.
They want people to track their expenses, really see where all their money is going.
It's like you're suddenly aware of what's been on autopilot.
Exactly. And for a lot of people, it can be a big shock. It helps them see their spending habits and think about whether they're really spending money on things that matter to them. It's not about creating a strict budget or just cutting back on everything. It's more about making conscious choices with your money. Choices that match what's actually important to you. So instead of just swiping your card without thinking, you're really considering the trade-offs you're making with each purchase.
Right, and the book also encourages you to think differently about the value of time. Instead of just thinking about your hourly wage, they suggest calculating your life energy for each dollar you make.
Life energy. Okay, I'm curious. Tell me more about that.
So let's say you work an 8-hour day and you earn $100. Instead of thinking I make $12.50 an hour, you start thinking, I traded 8 hours of my life energy for this $100. It really changes how you see the value of your time and how you decide to use it.
Wow, I never thought about it that way. It makes those impulse buys seem a lot less appealing when you think about it like that, because you're not just spending money, you're spending a part of your life.
It's exactly. Like, let's say you want to buy that new gadget that everyone's talking about, and it costs $500. How many hours did you have to work to earn that $500? Is it really worth that much of your life? It's about making decisions that match your values. Robin and Dominguez even talk about asking yourself, is spending my life energy this way actually making me happier? Am I really getting my money's worth in terms of, how satisfied I feel with my life?
It's like a whole new perspective on making decisions about spending. It's not just, can I afford this, but what am I giving up to get this?
Yeah, exactly. And it can be really powerful. It helps you get off that feeling of being trapped on a treadmill and start making choices that are in line with what you truly care about.
It sounds like the book gives you a really good roadmap for breaking free from that money trap and finding more fulfillment, living a life that matches your values and also takes care of the planet.
Yeah, and the authors are big on the idea that financial independence and taking care of the environment actually go together. They believe that by consuming less and being more mindful about our choices, we can reduce our impact on the planet and be happier at the same time.
I like that. It's not about depriving yourself. It's more like realizing that real happiness might not come from always wanting more stuff. So for someone listening who's ready to start making changes and spending their money on things that truly matter, what's one small step they could take today?
It's a simple but really powerful step. Start keeping track of your expenses. Just grab a notebook, use an app, whatever works for you, and for a week or even a month, just write down everything you buy.
Seems simple enough, but I bet it can be pretty eye-opening.
It definitely can. It helps you see where your money is actually going and become aware of those spending habits that you might not even realize you have. Then you can start making more intentional decisions.
Like you said before, you can't change what you don't even know is happening.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the book has a bunch of practical tips and strategies for making those changes.
This deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about your money or your life. Makes you question all those things we take for granted about what it means to be successful. It encourages us to consider a different way, a way that leads to financial independence and a life that really fits our values. And it's good for the planet, too.
And I think that's what really connects with people. It's about taking control of your finances so you can live a life that has real meaning to you, not just the life that society or advertising is trying to sell you.
It's been a really interesting conversation, and I definitely recommend checking out the book and digging into their whole 9-step program. It's got even more great insights and practical advice than we could cover here. But before we finish, I have one last thing for you to think about. What's one little change you could make today to start aligning your spending with what truly matters to you? Could be anything, like bringing your lunch to work instead of eating out, or unsubscribing from those emails that always make you want to buy something you don't need.
Or even just pausing for a second before you buy something and asking yourself, do I really need this, or am I just buying into this idea that I should have it?
Yeah, that's a great point. It's about being a more mindful consumer, making choices that are in line with your values and what you want to achieve. And remember, even small changes can make a big difference over time.
Absolutely. Making small changes consistently is the key to getting out of that money trap and creating a life with more financial freedom and fulfillment.
And it's not about saying no to everything. It's more about making sure that what we're spending our money on actually lines up with what makes us happy and what we truly value.
Exactly. It's like finding that balance, where our spending habits help us create a life that feels good, not just in the moment, but in the long run.
This deep dive into your money or your life has really been eye-opening. I know I've had to rethink some things. It's given us all a lot to consider about our relationship with money and how we spend our time, and what actually makes us truly happy in the long term.
It's a good reminder that we have more control over our finances and our happiness than we sometimes realize.
Well, thanks for joining us on this journey as we've explored your money or your life. We hope it's given you some new ways of thinking about things, and maybe even inspired you to take a closer look at how you relate to money and what really matters most to you.